"You're being dramatic, Dad." Those 4 words cut deeper than any physical wound ever could. If you've heard something similar, you're not alone in this pain. You raised them with sleepless nights and unconditional love. Now they treat you like you're the problem. Millions of parents are living this nightmare in silence, walking on eggshells around their own children. But here's what changes everything. 6 powerful shifts that reclaim your respect without losing your relationship. The 4th one will shock you. Most parents never imagine it will work. I'll share a real story for each shift, then give you the exact words to use and practical actions you can take today. The first shift starts with a grandmother who thought retirement would bring peace. Patricia dropped everything whenever her daughter called. She canceled her own plans, rearranged doctor appointments, and said yes to every request. When she finally offered gentle advice about her grandson's behavior, her daughter snapped, "Stop interfering, Mom. You're making everything harder." This is what happens when parents fall into approval-seeking behavior patterns. Patricia had created a toxic cycle where her worth depended entirely on her daughter's approval. Every time she bent over backward, she sent the same message: "My needs don't matter." Here's the psychological truth that destroys families. Desperation repels respect. When you chase validation from your children, you signal that you don't believe you deserve it naturally. They pick up on this energy immediately. Patricia was trapped in behaviors that killed her authority. She apologized for having opinions. She accepted blame for problems she didn't create. "I'm sorry, but I think," became her most common phrase. She was teaching her daughter that Mom's voice could be dismissed without consequence. The turning point came when Patricia stopped saying sorry for existing. Instead of, "I'm sorry, but I can't babysit this weekend because," she simply said, "I won't be available this weekend." No justification, no lengthy explanations. Her daughter's reaction was swift and brutal. Guilt trips, emotional manipulation. "I guess we know where we stand with you now, Mom. Here's what you need to know. This pushback is completely normal." Adult children panic when their accommodating parent suddenly develops boundaries. Expect emotional manipulation when you start setting limits. This reaction alone doesn't mean you made a mistake. Here's what most parents don't understand. The more desperately you need their approval, the less capable they believe you are of giving valuable guidance. Patricia's daughter started asking for advice again only after Patricia stopped offering it desperately. Respect returned the moment Patricia stopped begging for it. But what happens when they try to pull you into arguments about your new boundaries? That's where the next shift becomes crucial. Thomas spent 40 years as an engineer, designing systems that kept entire cities running. When he warned his son about risky investment choices, the response stung. "You don't understand how things work now, Dad. The world has changed." Most parents fall into the same trap Thomas did. They try to win respect through verbal battles, proving their worth with words. They defend their intelligence, list their accomplishments, remind their children of past successes. But every defensive word makes them look weaker. Arguing won't win respect. It only keeps you tied to the fight. Your adult children have nothing to lose in these battles. You have everything to lose. Thomas didn't realize that his defensive responses were validating his son's perception. Every time he explained why his advice mattered, he confirmed his son's belief that Dad was losing his edge. His words became proof of irrelevance. Instead of defending yourself, try these simple responses. "I hear you," then change the subject. Or, "I prefer not to debate this," and pause. Let the silence do the work. The shift happened when Thomas stopped defending his intelligence and started living it. Instead of arguing about investment strategies, he quietly moved his own portfolio. Instead of explaining market principles, he made smart financial moves without announcing them. He let his actions speak while his mouth stayed shut. Strategic silence has incredible power because it removes the soapbox your child uses and lets them notice your absence of neediness. When you stop filling the air with desperate explanations, Adult children are forced to fill that void with their own thoughts. They start watching instead of dismissing. Here's the psychology that changes everything. When you stop fighting for respect, you start commanding it through presence alone. Thomas's son began noticing his father's quiet confidence. The man who once argued about every financial decision now made moves with calm certainty. 6 months later, his son called with a question Thomas had heard before. "Dad, I'm thinking about this investment. What do you think?" The difference was everything. This time his son was asking, not dismissing. But leading by example only works when you have clear limits about what you will and won't accept. Those limits need to be real, with real consequences when crossed. Maria's husband died 3 years ago, leaving her alone in a house that suddenly felt too big. Her children stepped in to help, but help turned into expectation. She became the family's unpaid babysitter, showing up whenever they needed her. She listened to their problems for hours, absorbing their stress like a sponge. When her daughter called at 10 at night needing someone to watch the kids, Maria never said no. Here's the brutal reality nobody talks about. Adult children will take everything you give and then resent you for giving it. They start seeing your generosity as weakness, your availability as proof you have nothing better to do. Maria's children began treating her time as worthless because she treated it that way first. Guilt became their weapon to keep her trapped in servant mode. "I thought family came first with you, Mom. Dad would want you to help us." Every boundary attempt was met with emotional manipulation designed to keep her in line. Maria's transformation started with 3 simple words. "That doesn't work for me." No explanations, no apologies, no lengthy justifications about why she couldn't help. Just clear, simple refusal. When confronted with guilt, she added, "I understand you're upset, but I can't help at that time." She stopped being available on demand. Family dinners became scheduled events with RSVPs. Emergency babysitting became planned arrangements. When disrespect continued, she limited unplanned visits and phone calls until the behavior changed. Her children's reaction was nuclear. They accused her of being selfish, of changing, of not caring about family anymore. The anger was explosive because they suddenly realized their emotional ATM machine had imposed withdrawal limits. If this hits home, type 4 in the comments. I want to hear from you. Here's the truth that saves relationships. The angrier they get about boundaries, the more desperately those boundaries were needed. Maria's children eventually adjusted to the new reality. They started asking about her availability instead of assuming it. They began treating her time as valuable because she finally did. But boundaries only work when you have something meaningful to protect beyond just being someone's parent. Robert taught high school history for 37 years, commanding respect in every classroom. But when he retired, his own children started seeing him as just Dad. Not Robert the educator, just the guy who used to be somebody important. When you lose your individual identity, you become invisible to your own children. They stop seeing your wisdom and experience because all they see is someone whose entire world revolves around them. Robert realized this when his daughter interrupted his story with, "That's nice, Dad," before immediately changing the subject to her own problems. Here's the trap millions of parents fall into. They live only through their parental role while their children build rich, independent lives. Robert spent his days waiting for phone calls and making their problems his primary concern. Meanwhile, they were traveling, pursuing careers, and creating meaningful experiences. Adult children unconsciously dismiss parents who have no interests beyond family. Robert's children saw him as someone with nothing else going on, which made his opinions feel less valuable. Robert's transformation began when he picked up his old camera again and joined a hiking group. Suddenly, Robert had stories his children had never heard. His children were shocked to discover their father had a full life they knew nothing about. They started asking about his photography and his adventures. Even if grief, mobility, or energy limits your options, small steps work. Join a book club at your local library. Volunteer a few hours weekly. Take a community course. Phone-based groups and community centers offer accessible alternatives. When your child dismisses you, try this. That's not how I see it. Let me tell you about something I'm working on. Then share your new interest with confidence. Personal fulfillment creates magnetic appeal. Pursuing your own dreams makes you interesting and worthy of respect again. Now, Robert's children brag about their accomplished father instead of tolerating their needy one. But having your own life means more than just staying busy. It means protecting your emotional energy from becoming everyone else's dumping ground. This protection requires strategic emotional distance from their constant crises and drama. Eleanor lived for her children's phone calls. When her son called upset about work, she spent 2 hours listening and offering solutions. When her daughter fought with her husband, Eleanor became the marriage counselor. Every crisis became her crisis. She thought she was being a good mother. What she was actually doing was teaching them that her emotions didn't matter. Here's the painful paradox that destroys parent-child relationships. The more emotionally dependent you are on your children, the less they value your emotions. Eleanor's children saw her as an emotional dumping ground, not a source of wisdom. They came to her when they needed to vent, not when they needed real guidance. This isn't about becoming cold or abandoning your children. It's about choosing to protect your emotional energy instead of absorbing everyone else's stress. Eleanor realized her children viewed her as someone who existed to handle their emotional overflow, not as someone whose own feelings deserved consideration. Eleanor's transformation required specific steps. She stopped answering crisis calls immediately. When her daughter called in tears, Eleanor said, "I'm sorry you're upset. I can't fix this right now, but I believe you can find a way." For lengthy drama sessions, she tried, "I'm not able to talk through this for hours. Can we set a time to speak later?" Important safety note: if a child faces real danger like self-harm or violence, contact emergency services or community support immediately. Strategic distance applies to everyday drama, not genuine emergencies. The transition from emotional caretaker to emotionally independent adult was brutal. Her children panicked when their emotional safety net disappeared. They accused her of being cold, of not caring anymore. This panic is completely normal and expected when you change emotional availability. But emotional unavailability creates value. When Eleanor became harder to reach emotionally, her children started treating her emotions with more respect. Scarcity made her support precious instead of expected. Now her children call to check on her emotional well-being instead of dumping their problems on her. But this shift only works when you consistently demonstrate self-worth through everyday actions. These actions create the foundation, but they need to become automatic habits that signal your worth every single day. Harold thought grand gestures would restore his family's respect. He planned elaborate birthday parties, gave expensive gifts, and made dramatic speeches about family values. Nothing worked. His children still interrupted him mid-sentence, dismissed his opinions, and treated him like background noise at family gatherings. The breakthrough came when Harold realized respect isn't earned through big moments. It's built through daily self-respect. Here's why small, consistent actions matter more than grand gestures. Respect is rebuilt through steady self-respect, not desperate attempts to prove your value. Small acts of self-disrespect had accumulated over years, creating a family culture where disrespecting grandpa became completely normal. Harold started with these specific micro-actions. Speak without apologizing for your opinions. Calmly say "I wasn't finished" when interrupted. Dress neatly for family gatherings. And set clear conversation expectations. Pick one micro-action each week and consciously practice it at every family interaction. This builds momentum without overwhelming yourself. When Harold stopped accepting interruptions and calmly said, "Please let me finish," then paused, his family felt jarred. This is how you handle tests of new boundaries. Use that exact phrase, then wait. Don't fill the silence with explanations or apologies. His children had to adjust to the new Harold. The man who once apologized for breathing now expected to be heard when he spoke. They tested his boundaries initially, but consistent self-respect created an unshakable foundation that couldn't be shaken by temporary pushback. The compound effect built momentum. Each day, Harold treated himself with dignity. Others began following his lead. Self-respect became contagious throughout the family dynamic. The transformation completed when his teenage grandson approached him privately, asking for advice about college choices. Harold had become someone worth listening to again. But here's what most parents still don't understand about where true respect actually comes from. Respect comes from self-respect, boundaries, and a full life. You have the power to change how your children see you by changing how you see yourself. Stop waiting for your children to change and start becoming the parent who naturally commands respect. The shift begins with you, not them. When you respect yourself, set boundaries, and build a meaningful life, they have no choice but to see you differently. You have control over your own dignity and worth. When you treat yourself with respect, others follow your lead. Or comment below with one small step you'll try this week. Subscribe if you want more support on this journey. Remember, if you're struggling with depression, anxiety, or isolation, consider reaching out to community resources or a trusted counselor. You don't have to navigate this alone.